Hey, what's up, everybody? We have a new YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe right now. Leave a comment on the video. Share it with your friends. It's also a podcast, 3 and Out, wherever you listen with me, John Middlekauff, Apple, Spotify. We have you covered, as well as thevolume.com. We have merch. Check out. I got 3 and Out hats right now. Thevolume.com. Search the podcast. Buy some merch. Jed York talked to the media today and gave a little press conference. Kind of impromptu to all the local guys. I love when a coach or a GM, just gives the local guys some love. And he told this story about 2022, right? So this was the 23 season, so it was last year. Brock Purdy's rookie season. And he said that Kyle Shanahan grabbed him after a training camp practice or sometime early in training camp and said, "I need to talk to you." And he said, "Listen, I think we might have the best quarterback on the roster, and it's the 7th round pick. We might have found something." Essentially what he said. I heard the way Jed told the story is not exactly how the story was told, but essentially like, we got something here. And I was thinking about one thing that's never really served me wrong, and I would imagine many people can relate to this, is when your gut tells you something. There are things in life, whether it's as a football coach, whether it's in any business that we do, whether it's in our relationships, that you kind of know early. You're like, God, she's special. We might need to make this a long-term. I want this woman to be the mother of my children. Or like, God, this company is something bad is on the horizon. I need to get the fuck out of here. I've had it happen to me twice. When Chip Kelly was hired after Andy was fired, I knew early on after a little, I don't want to say an argument. There was a contentious conversation of me giving my opinion in a draft meeting, Chip kind of firing back, and everyone after, like in the hotel room, while the scouts were saying, I was like, I don't know if that went well. I'm like, I don't think so either. And then it was clear, my gut told me this thing was ending. And I had the same thing happen in radio. And my gut told me something's off here. When a boss who had originally hired me, had put me on a radio show, and we had a lot of success together, left the company. And then we hired this new guy, and it was like, this is not going to work out. This is no chance. And you know it right away. Now, it doesn't mean you make a decision right away, but I think usually when your gut tells you something, positively or negatively, you kind of know. And I've been to enough practices in my life to know if you're just like the way I go to practices now, or at least I don't go to as many anymore, but to a training camp practice, if I go to Raider practices or Niner practices, it's kind of hard to tell, right? If I'm just attending practice, like, this guy's making some plays. But when you work for a team, or when I would text people on those teams, I remember texting a guy who worked for the Raiders when they drafted Khalil Mack. And he said after like the second OTA practice, it was so abundantly clear that Khalil Mack was the best player on their team, it wasn't even funny. And sometimes you just know right away. Now, it's harder with later round draft picks because in football, you're not wearing pads at practice. But I knew early on when Kyle had to change his offense for Trey Lance and then to a running offense, kind of like what Lamar did as a young player or what he did with RG3, but Trey wasn't a very good runner. I'm like, I don't think this is going to work. And my gut, it's not like Kyle texted me this. It's like, I can't imagine Kyle likes doing this at all. And then when they got Brock Purdy, he can just run Kyle's offense. And he told Jed York, I think this guy's going to eventually be our starting quarterback. And I think, now listen, did anyone have any clue that he could be a starting quarterback and throw 30-plus touchdowns and help them get to the Super Bowl? No chance. But I do think you can like someone. And I do think you can know, especially these coaches with a guy running their offense or their defense, like, we got something here mentally on a different level. And that's an element that coaches don't talk about publicly a lot. The stuff that, we see the plays. I remember Andy Reid told me this years ago. He's like, the thing about Tyreek Hill that no one talks about because he's catching all these touchdowns and he runs by everyone, is he's one of the smartest guys on the team. He's like, I can tell him a play because they're constantly doing shit in practice, right? Inventing plays. I can tell him one time exactly what to do, and he remembers forever. The football IQ in the heyday of Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and Tyreek Hill, was off the fucking charts. Now, Purdy doesn't have those guys' talent. He was a 7th rounder for a reason. Like, a lot of his talent is the intangible stuff. Picked up Kyle's offense like that, understood the reads like that, makes the correct decisions like that, is accurate like that. So coaches, listen, sometimes the pushback of people in the front office, the scouts, the GMs, is we like talent. We like physical attributes. Because over the course of time, if you coach that guy up, he can be a really good player. And coaches like people, ideally, you get Tyreek Hill, who's an elite talent and smart, right? Football wise. So you can give him everything, right? That's what, like, Kobe, Michael Jordan, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning. Like, you get the total package. Ray Lewis. Most guys are somewhere in the middle. Super talented, have some deficiencies. Not as talented, make up for it with try hard and work ethic and smarts, right? When you get the guy that's Peyton Manning or Tom Brady, you become an unstoppable Aaron Rodgers, start rattling off MVPs and dominate, right? But Brock Purdy's a great example of someone who was valued more with the coaches immediately than us on the outside. And I think looking back, when the Niners kept him on the roster, listen, it took a broken foot or an ankle from Trey Lance and a broken foot from Jimmy Garoppolo, but the coaches liked him and they liked him early. And anytime as a player, and I would recommend this to any guy, the faster you can learn the playbook, as a mid to later round guy, the faster you could make plays in training camp that impress the coaches. It's a tried and true formula. Obviously, effort and being early and being a good guy, all that shit matters. But the easiest way to make a team is not just make plays, it's to know what you're doing. Obviously, you have to have the talent, but if you get drafted, you have football talent. But you'd be shocked how many guys struggle to know what they're doing because it's complex. A lot of these guys come from offenses. What I hear, what was the stat? They had the amount of guys in this upcoming draft that were under center. It's like 47 snaps. I don't even want to screw it up. But I remember one time they asked how many guys at a Senior Bowl, this was years ago, had never been under center in college. And like every quarterback raised their hand. So what you're doing in college while you're playing football at quarterback, it doesn't parallel what you're going to end up doing in the pros. Doesn't mean you can't figure it out or learn it or transition, but it is difficult for a lot of guys. And I think Brock Purdy is a good example of one of his traits that when everyone's like, this guy's not good enough, half the league struggles making the right decision. I think a lot of guys, like once you become a starting quarterback or in the league, have a pretty good idea. Like when you're in a meeting room, I can tell you what we're supposed to do against this coverage. When it's this play call, what to audible in, when they're giving you this look. A lot of guys can do that great on a whiteboard in the meeting room with the quarterback coach and the offensive coordinator. It's like, shit, this guy knows what he's talking about. Can talk football like they're Peyton Manning or Tom Brady. Then there's a smaller percentage once you take them to the field in practice that can do that. If you can do that, you're going to impress some people. And then there's the next level of like, how about the game? When you have no clue because that's why training camp and the preseason games are so much different than the regular season. Because you're going up against a defense in a preseason game that is just running their stuff. That is, for the most part, running pretty bland looks. It's not a game plan look. Well, once week 1 hits, I'm playing whoever, Mike McDonald, Vic Fangio, you name it, Wink Martindale, Dan Quinn, who are giving me all these looks, Spagnuolo. They're like, God, I didn't see this on tape. I didn't know this was coming. And can you still function when you don't know the answers to the test? Because that's football. You don't know the answers to the test when you go into a game. That's what makes Patrick Mahomes and Brady and all these guys that can sustain it forever at such a high level. It's like, football genius. And that's one element of Purdy's game. Listen, he does not have the strongest arm. And he's definitely not the tallest quarterback. So it's not easy for him to see, and he gets some balls batted sometimes. But his knowledge of what to do in big spots, he's also a very instinctive player. And this goes back to the draft. When they drafted Trey Lance, I watched Trey Lance. I went to a lot of practices with Trey Lance, and I watched all his snaps in the 4 games that he started. He's not a natural. It doesn't feel natural. Like you watched him and something fell off. He didn't play fast, right? And he was a, kind of a hybrid player. When you watch some of these young, like Herbert right away, who's a hybrid, big athlete, can move, the game came very natural to him. And I'm not saying he's a perfect player by any means, but it was like there wasn't a, it just flowed. He played fast. And that's one thing with Brock Purdy. Now, when he gets in trouble, when he feels a little overwhelmed, he definitely doesn't. But he is a guy that as the game goes, he's a very instinctive and natural player. And that's how he makes up for some of his physical limitations. Obviously benefits from a good coordinator and good talent around him. But, I think that's a pretty telling quote that it's why I said this entire offseason. Trey Lance was done. He was never going to be the backup quarterback. They hired Sam Darnold to be the backup quarterback. And everyone and some of these gutter rats, as I call them on the internet, the big Niner fans that for some reason wanted Trey Lance to be the starting quarterback. I'm like, guys, he's not. They signed Sam Darnold. He's going to be the backup. Purdy's going to start if he's healthy, and Sam Darnold's going to be the backup. I didn't quite know they were going to trade him before week 1, but do you know what Jed told you today? Kyle had kind of turned on Trey 2 years ago. That said, this guy can't run my offense. And I'll say this, it was a monumental mistake. It's why you don't make decisions out of desperation. Anything in life, right? If you're fighting with your wife, don't try to have a kid to save the marriage, right? If you're going bankrupt, I wouldn't recommend going to Vegas and putting it all on black, right? Or put it all in one stock to hopefully double, right? Just sometimes when you are in a desperate situation, you just got to take a deep breath. But when you got to be able to pivot. One of Belichick's greatest strengths, I always thought as a head coach, he missed a lot of picks, right? He'd get rid of them after like 2 or 3 years. Like, God, Bill just drafted that guy in the second round like a year and a half ago. He's already traded. And he had the equity and the juice to do it. Most guys do not. And they play it out forever. The Jets were done with Zach Wilson 2 years ago. They were done with him. But it's like Aaron Rodgers can save him, and they kept him. They should have got rid of him when they knew. And he would have had some value. Maybe you get rid of him for like a 3rd-round pick or whatever. This is after his 2nd year, even as ugly as it was, because someone would have still been desperate enough. And now they're in a position when no one's touching that guy. Probably have to cut him. So I just think that, listen, they made a mistake. And they got lucky, that the 7th rounder can really play. But once they knew it, they pivoted and they pivoted fast. So, and that's a big reason why they're here right now. I don't even think they're a playoff team with Trey Lance, and Jimmy Garoppolo is terrible now. So sometimes the football gods, when you're aggressive, take care of you.